Welcome to the Flora Sage Podcast, a place where we help you create a life you're excited about. I am beyond excited to share with you this week's podcast episode topic. Oh my goodness. So this week we are looking at your priorities and figuring out just what the heck they are. And I'm also going to help you identify what phase of life that you're in. If you are driving, listen to it, but then come back to this because this will require some writing. And yes, I do my podcast differently than other people's. I know a lot of people that's just more for like mind chatter for you to listen to while you're driving to and from places, but I very much like to get stuff done. And how you get stuff done is actually do the work. And this work for today's podcast is so life-changing. Oh my goodness. So, as you know, I've been helping people for over 24 years. And often people just really don't know what phase of life that they're in until they all of a sudden have a conversation about it, they hear about it, maybe are listening to a podcast like this about it, and then they're like, oh my gosh. I mean, most people have heard of the empty nester phase, but that's pretty much usually the only phase we hear about. So today I'm going to share with you some of the phases of life that we're in, how it can impact you, how it can impact your priorities, and then we're going to get into how you can figure out what your true priorities are. So are you ready? Woo! Yes, let's do this. All right, so some of the typical phases that happen in life are, 1, you're born. Okay, you're a toddler. You are a middle-aged and school-aged child, you're a teenager, you go to college, possibly, so then you're in like your teens, your 20s, and then beyond. Okay, so there's the kid phase or the child or adolescent phase. Then in your 20s, some people jump in right away and have kids. Other people, they go to college. Some people don't want kids at all. Some people jump headfirst into starting their own businesses. Some people start into, corporate America. And other people just couch surf or they live in mom and dad's house and just kind of coast for a while. Some people choose to get married. Some people don't choose to get married. Some people are gypsies where they kind of move around there, and that's like... I love that. I am a gypsy at heart. And then there is, of course, the phase that we all know is the empty nesting phase. Most of us have heard that before. So what phase are you in? Well, ask yourself, do I want kids? Am I raising kids? Am I trying to have kids? Kids they play a huge factor in what you do and in your mindset and in your focus. So if you're trying to have kids, that is one of your main focuses right now. That's one of your main priorities, I'm assuming, since you are trying to have kids. And so, do you not want kids? Are you building your business? Are you climbing the corporate ladder? Are you in the middle of raising kids? Are you both simultaneously raising kids and building your business or raising or climbing that corporate ladder? Are you in the latter stages of raising kids? Are they teenagers? Are they getting ready to graduate high school? Are they in college? Are they still living with you while they're living in college? Are you an empty nester? Are you an empty nester that has now accepted your adult children back into your home while they transition from military life or from a divorce or a layoff or whatever? Or are you in full-blown retirement where you're off just doing your own thing? Are you an empty nester that is raising one of your adult children's children? So I want you to really get honest with yourself about where you're at. If you want kids, you don't want kids, that again influences you a lot as far as, like I said, your priorities. The kid factor, if you have the kids, or if you have your own business. So all of that. Now, once you get clear about that phase, I also want you to look at some of the underlying phases. So if you're sick or ill, you are in the phase of convalescence. So you're temporarily going to pause your priorities, which again, we're going to talk about priorities in just a moment. You're going to pause your priorities because your main priorities when you're convalescing is to get better, to heal. So this could be a car accident that you're recovering from. This could be COVID. This could be a flu. This could be bronchitis. whatever it is. Allow yourself to recognize that that is your main priority right now, is to heal and get better. And self-care is your number one priority. Another underlying phase that you could have going on at the same time as one of the other phases is the phase of moving. Often when we move, that is literally all we can think about. Because what's happening is you're packing, you're prepping your place, you're cleaning it, if you're selling a house, you're listing it, you're doing all the things, the home repairs. Like that literally takes up all your time. You're finding new doctors, new veterinarians. You're finding, if you have pets, you're finding all the things. You're switching over utilities. It literally takes up all your time. And so that, in that moment, when you are moving, is going to take up all of your time and is going to be your main priority. Besides, of course, hopefully eating and sleeping. In the meantime, in between packing boxes and whatnot. But that is a big phase that a lot of people just kind of forget about. Also, when you are in between jobs, that is another underlying phase that you could be brought in with. So at any given time, you could be in the main phase of your life with some underlying phase or phases in play. Now, during COVID, a lot of people had several phases at once. Some people were laid off, some people were not. So if you were laid off, that was or is hopefully a temporary phase of your life where you are looking for work. If you were laid off and had COVID, you were both looking for work and convalescing. So typically, convalescence trumps looking for a job. Then once you're well, then you can then look for a job. So if you're also raising babies or raising kids or teenagers, each of those phases of childhood requires you to show up a little bit differently than the other phases. Like, obviously the infant stage requires you to show up differently than the toddler stage versus the elementary school, middle school, high school. It's all there. My kids are now 22 and 25 at the time of this recording. So I'm very well versed in the phases of childhood. I also have a lot of friends that have chosen not to have kids, and they still go through these shifting of phases with their careers, with their relationships, all the things. So that's another thing that I want to add to the mix of underlying phases is your relationships. So relationships also go through phases. You have when you're first dating, you have that honeymoon phase, and then you have all the other phases going into hopefully a long-term, long-lasting relationship for you, and hopefully it's a healthy relationship. So there's so many different dynamics and so many different things at play. And people often wonder why they can't focus on getting certain things done. Well, often, like I said before, they may not know what phase of life they're in and how to really show up in that phase. And so allowing yourself to get really clear about, okay, what phase am I in? And what does this require from me? So if you have your journal, write that down. What phase am I in? And what does this phase require from me right now? As infants, they need a lot of looking after. As teenagers, not so much. Just making sure that they come home, they do their homework, maybe they clean their room, once a month. But, and of course, hopefully connecting with them on a daily basis. But if you're building your business, what is required of you of this phase? Are you climbing the corporate ladder? What is required of you at this phase? Are you an empty nester? Are you retiring? Are you moving? Are you convalescing? What is required of me to fully show up for myself and others during this phase of my life? So that's the first thing that I want you to get really, really clear on. You may need to pause this if you want to just kind of sit and just hash it out a little bit in your journal. Perfect. If you're really clear with your phase and you know exactly how you need to show up during this time, perfect. Then we can move on. So very briefly, I'm going to share with you, I started my business when I had one child. So my oldest son was born in 95. I started my business in 97. I officially started my business in 97. And then my youngest son was born in 99. And I was building my business kind of on the side from 97 through 2009. And then 2009, I brought my coaching practice to YouTube and started several channels. One of them took off and then, kind of evolved the way that it did. My in-person practice of helping people declutter their homes, coaching people in person, doing workshops in person, that just kind of stayed with the status quo. And so also during that time, I went back to college. I started college in 2004, graduated in 2009. So also during that time, I also got married. So I had a lot of different phases going on at once. I was a college student. I was a mom. I was a new bride. All of those things played a part into how I showed up for my life and what was a priority. And sometimes when you have a lot of these things going on, there's a lot of juggling going on. So that's why it's so clear, or it's so important to get clear. That's why it's so important to get clear on what phase of life that you're in. And then based on the phase of life that you're in, then we're gonna look at priorities. This is where you get your piece of paper and your pen out so that we really can look at what your priorities really are and what they should be during this time of your life. This exercise you can actually find in chapter 3 of the 1 Degree Shift book. It starts on page 15. And I'm so pumped about this exercise because this exercise has literally changed so many people's lives. I have stopped counting because so many people have written to me like, oh my God, Flora, I can't believe my lists were like this. List number 1. So I want you to take out 3 pieces of paper or get a journal and make sure that you have at least 3 pieces of blank paper available to you for this exercise. First piece of paper. This is going to be list number 1. I want you at the top of your first piece of paper to write list 1. And then I want you to write out your top 4 things that you spend the most time on during your day outside of your main occupation. I'm going to repeat that. I want you to write out your top 4 things that you spend the most time on during the day outside of your main occupation. So if your main occupation is a stay-at-home mom, that is your main occupation. So what are the top 4 things that you focus on outside of that? If your main occupation is driving truck, perfect. What do you do outside of that time? If your main occupation is being a teacher, if your main occupation is being a CEO, if your main occupation is being a janitor, if your main occupation is being the produce person at Whole Foods, whatever it is, if you're a blogger, whatever it is, outside of your main occupation, what are the top 4 things that you spend the most time on? This could be driving to work. This could be looking at social media. This could be arranging social engagements for your family. If you are a stay-at-home mom, this typically is pretty normal, such as play dates or soccer practices or whatever. That is list number 1. If you need to, go ahead and pause this and then start it up again when you are finished. On the top of the second piece of paper, I want you to write list 2. And I want you to write out the 4 things that you routinely do each day that are outside of your obligations. So write the top 4 things that you routinely do that are outside of your obligations. This is kind of like your come hell or high water, I will do this every day. So this could be your morning coffee. This could be your morning yoga. This could be reading or listening to podcasts. This could be checking your favorite social media feed. Okay, so these are the things that you generally do not negotiate out of your routine. Like for me, I take my supplements every morning and I walk my dog every single day. Like that is non-negotiable. I must take my supplements and I must walk my dog. Otherwise, my dog is giving me the hairy eyeballs saying, hey, you didn't walk me today. And we typically walk for upwards and more of 2 hours every single day. So he's very, very active, which I love. I mean, I literally could walk for days. So, all right, if you need to pause this, go ahead and pause it and then start it up again after you've written down on list number 2 the 4 things that you do come hell or high water every single day, no matter what. And this is something that you generally do not negotiate out of your routine. All right, the next thing, at the top of the last piece of paper, I want you to write list 3. And I want you to write out your top 4 priorities for your life. So these are the things that you feel that you must achieve or that you want to achieve to have a successful life. Typically people put, well, I want financial independence, I want a healthy lifestyle, I want to be a good parent, one of my priorities is education. So write out what your top 4 priorities are. You can pause this and then start it up again when you're finished. Now that you have finished your 3 lists, what I want you to do is do a side-by-side comparison. Do any of the items on your lists match up? Ideally, let's just say that one of your priorities is education. And let's just say that one of the things come hell or high water that you do from your list number 2 is every day you read 10 pages, or every day you listen to a podcast, or every day you listen to an audiobook on your way to work. Or you maybe listen to a podcast or a book while you're walking your dog. And then one of the things that occupies, most of your time quite possibly could be listening to your books or looking up stuff or researching. So that means that your priority is weaved into the fabric of your life. It is a non-negotiable, and it's something that you choose to make part of your day. Let's just say that financial independence is one of your priorities. And let's just say that the, come hell or high water task is to listen to financial podcasts, maybe Dave Ramsey. Maybe it is reading financial books. And so maybe one of your non-negotiables from list 2 is listening to a podcast or reading a book. Maybe one of the things that you would do on a daily basis is look at your investments or check your accounts just to see the status, just to be aware and knowledgeable. So then your lists would match up. But frequently when I do this with people, nothing matches up on their lists. What they say is a priority is not on list number 2, which is your come hell or high water, I'm going to do this every single day. And what occupies their time outside of their main career or their main occupation does not reflect any of their priorities. This is a huge eye-opener for so many people. And one of the reasons why this is such a huge eye-opener is because people are like, oh my God, I thought I wanted this as a priority, but I don't have time to do this. If you want to go powerlifting at the gym, but right now you're convalescing, obviously you're not going to be able to powerlift. If right now you're in school and schoolwork and the school class time takes up all your time, you may not have time to go to the gym and start powerlifting. Do you know what I mean? What people, I think, don't realize is that your priorities are not fixed. You can change your priorities. When I was raising my babies, they're now young men, my priorities shifted and changed as they grew. When they were babies, I was a stay-at-home mom for several years. And then I realized I need to work from home because I don't like bringing them to daycare and all these other things. And if I did work, I always said, I will drop my kids off at school and I will pick them up. They will not go to daycare. And they briefly did go to daycare for about 2 years, and that was it. The rest of the time, I negotiated with my employer so that I could do as much as I could for work while I was there. As long as I got all of the things done, it was incredible. It was an amazing arrangement, so good. But I knew one of my main priorities was I'm going to be there for my children. come hell or high water. That was a priority, and that was something I made sure was part of my day. And this was back in the day before cell phones, and so we played all the time. We went to the zoo. We did very enriching exercises and enriching things. We had memberships to all the places. I was on a very tight budget. I was on food stamps when they were young, so I didn't really have a whole lot of money. And what I did was I knew that these memberships to like the zoo and places like that were really important to me as a mom. So what I did for my withholding from work was I had on my W-2 single and zero, and then at the end of the year, I would usually get a big chunk of change back. When I got that tax refund back, I would purchase memberships to the zoo and the science museum and the children's museum so that on any given weekend, I could pack up a lunch. I would make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with some almonds and some cheese and some apples, and we would go and we would spend literally all day at the zoo or the children's museum or the science museum and just have so much fun. Or we'd go to the park, and we were always out doing things, and we had a snack, and it was so good. That was my priority, and I weaved it into the fabric of my life. Now, as they got older, of course, our activities shifted and changed, but I always had that priority of being a very present mom. When they were teenagers, they would play their video games. I would hang out in their room. I would crochet. As they're sitting there playing video games, we'd sit there, we'd BS, we'd talk. I would make food, and it was amazing. It was awesome. But again, for me, that was perfect. For somebody else, they might be like lame or whatever, but that's just a beautiful thing about priorities and about the way that you live your life is do what's perfect for you. Do what feels good for you. Do what is in alignment for you. So allowing yourself to really recognize not only the phase of life that you're in, but how you want to show up and what those underlying things are that are impacting you are huge. So I want to address a couple other things about some of the phases of life that you're in. And I actually want to segue this with a story. Back in 1993, I injured my back. I had a skydiving accident when I was in the Marine Corps. Busted off the little wings on my L4. I had what was called a bilateral pars 4 fracture. So basically, your vertebrae have these little wings on either side that keep that vertebrae in place. Those little wings on my L4 were broken off because of this skydiving accident. And so fast forward 20 some years, I was walking down the stairs with socks. I had hardwood floors, and slipped and fell on my back. Doot, 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 doot. I bounced down the stairs on my back, which resulted in me re-injuring my back, and I had to get back surgery. So, got my L4, L5 fused and was convalescing, and I fell into a deep depression. So much so that I started on antidepressants for about 2 days, had all the really bad side effects, and I'm like, nope, can't do this. But in that phase of my life, I was not only being a single mom and having my own business. My father had passed away shortly before that, and we had just moved from Oklahoma to Wisconsin. Then I was convalescing. So all kinds of weight was on my shoulders. And that caused a lot of I don't want to say turmoil within me, but a lot of feelings of oh my God, how can I fully show up for my kids when I'm convalescing and I'm still trying to run a business, and now I'm feeling depressed and sorry for myself because I can't do anything physically and I'm a super active person. So giving yourself permission to just taking a moment and just take a breath and go, okay, I'm only one person. Do I need to ask for help? So many times people don't ask for help when you're in a challenging season of your life. And those challenging seasons are just a phase. It's not forever. It's not forever. When you can give yourself permission to look at a stressor or stressors that are going on in your life, and again, these are usually just a phase that is passing, that you are passing through, it's so beneficial to recognize that and to ask for help. So if you feel like you are in that space of challenge, if you feel like that you are in that space of like, oh my God, I'm convalescing, or I don't have a job and this, or I have a job, but it's really challenging and I'm trying to do this and trying to do that. And yet, like all the things, like only you know what your situation is right now. Give yourself permission to recognize these stressors and to recognize these mini phases all kind of stacked up in the regular phase that you're in. And if you need to ask for help, ask for help. There's no shame in that game, seriously. And the beautiful thing is so many people think that, well, if I ask for help, that means that I'm like weak, or I'm a slacker, or I can't handle my shit or whatever. And that's not the case. The strong people are usually the ones that ask for help because you recognize, you're like, dude, I cannot do this on my own. Like, I legit need help. Give yourself permission to ask the people in your life for help. And some people think, well, I don't really have anybody. I don't have anybody. Like, I don't know. I don't even know who I could ask. Find relatives, friends, neighbors. If you're a veteran, call the VA. They have people that can help. If you're a single mom, call. There's single mom groups around. There's mom groups everywhere. If you're part of a church or a certain type of fellowship, call those people. Tell them that you need help. There's so many resources for people, but you just have to ask. And if you don't know where to ask, I'm sure you have some type of social media. Go onto your social media page and say, and don't be vague, be specific. Say, hey guys, or hey people, or hey friends, or wherever, I need help about or around this in my life. And just ask, does anybody have any resources for me? I'm really struggling right now and need some help. The strength that comes first and foremost from recognizing that you need help is huge. And the strength to convey that is even bigger. And people are going to come out of the woodwork and be like, oh my gosh, totally. Like, this is my jam. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard of someone being sick or ill, or their parents are sick or ill, and they're, caring for their parents, and their house is just an absolute disaster. I'll go in and clean their house for free. Like, there's no shame in asking. There is no shame in asking. And it is an honor for those of us that can help. It is awesome. It is so awesome. Like, think about the last time that you helped somebody just for the sake of helping. Like, maybe you gave somebody a sandwich, or you gave somebody on the side of the road a bottle of water and a hand warmer or something in the middle of winter. Or you opened the door for someone, or you bought someone's meal. Like, it is like the best feeling ever. So give someone else the opportunity to help you, because that feels freaking amazing. Okay. So to reiterate what we talked about today, figure out what phase of life you're in, and you can have more than one phase going on at once. Most people do. Okay. Second thing, look at your lists. What takes up the majority of your time throughout the day besides your main occupation? Then what, come hell or high water, do you do every single day that is non-negotiable? And then what are your priorities? What are your top 4 priorities? Now, what I recommend that you do after this podcast is to sit down and say, okay, now that I've listened to this, and now I've kind of had my come to Jesus moment, like, oh my gosh, my lists do not match up, or I have maybe 1 or 2 things on my lists that match up. Now let's look at, okay, how can I recreate these or craft something so that I can now start to live my life according to my priorities. Now, if you've been listening to my podcasts, the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about standards. Standards are basically a set of rules or habits that you implement and you put in place so that you can have the life that you want by default. However, if you don't know what phase of life that you're in, if you don't know what your priorities are or how you even spend your time, that's why we look at list 1 and 2, and then your priorities is list number 3. How are you going to know specifically what standards you have? Now, allowing yourself to do this work is huge. So after this podcast, sit down and say, all right, now that I know what phase of life that I'm in, let me really look at what I want my priorities to be. Now, a little word of caution. Make sure these are your priorities, not what you think your mom wants you to do, or what your partner or spouse wants you to do, or what your dad or your neighbor or your mentor, whatever. What do you want? What is important to you right now? For you, are you a newly diagnosed diabetic that you're like, I can't believe I just got notified that I'm diabetic? Like, what the hell? And maybe you're angry and pissed at yourself. So you can say, no, this is not going to happen. So one of your priorities might be, yes, maybe you're taking some, like metformin or some diabetic, medication for right now, but you are committed. You are committed to changing your diagnosis from having type 2 diabetes to now being free from diabetes. And I know this, one of my very close friends was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and she's like, I was so pissed at myself. Oh my goodness. So she took her medicine, literally, but then she also did a ton of research. She started working out. She started on keto and lost a bunch of weight. She feels better than ever. She is now no longer diabetic. She is now no longer on any medications, and she feels better than she has in 30 years, she said. And I'm like, yes, so good. So for a time, her priority was to get off the medication. Now her priority is to stay healthy. So you got to get really honest about where you're at. And this is one of the things we've been talking about in all my podcasts is where are you at and where do you want to be? And the more honest that you can get with yourself about that, the better. The better. Are you in a relationship? Okay, cool. Are you happy? Are you miserable? Are you like beyond ecstatic and everything is perfect? Or are 4 parts of your relationship great, but the other 3 parts could use a little bit of work? Do you love your job? Do you hate your job? Is it kind of a mixed bag? The more honest that you can get about everything, the better, because then you know exactly where you're starting from. It's kind of like a GPS. Okay, you're starting from Phoenix. Okay, which part of Phoenix? Which part? The north, the south, the east, the west, the southeast, like what? The more specific you can be, the better. And then where are you going? So your phase tells you like where you're starting from. What phase are you in? What's on your plate right now? Is it losing weight? Is it paying off debt? Is it learning to communicate with your partner? Really get honest with yourself. Is it raising your babies? Is it trying to communicate better with your children? Is it spending more time with your kids? Is it curbing your social media usage? Like, what is it? Is it getting more sleep? Is it starting, maybe intermittent fasting? Whatever it is, whatever your priorities are right now, give yourself permission to recognize that your priorities and your activities are going to change. They're fluid. They're not fixed. It's like not something that you can like frame and put on a wall and they never ever change. It's your priorities and your phases are ever evolving. It's like living and breathing, and change is the only constant that we can count on. So when you can recognize that as your children grow, as you grow, as your business grows, as your career grows and develops, as you just live, so are your priorities. They're going to change. They're going to grow. They're going to evolve. They're going to morph into what is important to you. So my mental health is very, very important. That is one of my top priorities. And so part of my mental health regime is getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night. It's taking my supplements. I can't do medications because I'm very sensitive to all that stuff, so I usually get all the side effects. So I do supplements. I do supplements that are good for brain health and good for the nervous system. So that is my hell or high water. Like, I must get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, a minimum, every single night. I must take my supplements. I must drink my water. I must avoid caffeine and alcohol. I must have time outside. I must do some type of exercise. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that For me, this is easy. This is just how I live my life. I've built those things in there. Now, you could call these a set of standards. I will take my supplements. I will walk my dog twice a day. And usually we get in, like I said, at least 2 hours of walking every single day. That's my standard. But that gives me my life by default. It's huge, huge, huge. Like I can't even explain how huge this is. And all of this comes from figuring out what's truly important to you. And like I said, it's not what's important to your mom, not what's important to your spouse or partner or your neighbor. This is what's important to you. Now, yes, I think that you should have your own priorities. Your partner should have their own priorities. And then as a couple, you have your own priorities. Like I have my own set of priorities. I have my own set for me. And I have my own set for my business. My partner also has his own set of priorities. Now, as a couple, we have another set of priorities. So that would take a conversation that you have with your partner, allowing yourself to recognize this is huge, huge. And when we feel that one of our priorities is shifting, we have a conversation about it. The best relationships are the ones where you can have the most awkward conversations ever. And the more awkward the conversation, the better, because then you know that you're getting into the raw nitty-gritty stuff. And sometimes having this conversation with yourself about your priorities and the phase of life that you're in is huge. Huge, 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 huge. Because that's when you have those aha moments. That's when you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, so I thought I wanted this, but I really don't. And this is actually what I do want. And sometimes that requires some shifting to go on in your life. But change is the only constant. And when you can recognize that, hopefully these exercises and this work will come as a welcomed shift for you. I hope you feel excited about this work. I hope you feel excited about these exercises. You might have to play this a couple times to get everything because I packed a lot into today's podcast. If you would like my support and my help, this is my jam. This is my jam. I've written a whole book about this. I would love to support you inside of the 1 Degree Shift Tribe. The link for this is in today's show notes. Every single day inside of the 1 Degree Shift Tribe, I meet with my members inside of this fabulous app called Voxer. It's a voice and text app. It's so good. And we do all kinds of amazing coaching. You get all kinds of support. And I would love to be able to support you in this. We've had our members working through this process. And I'm telling you, their minds are blown. And they're like, oh my gosh. And the beautiful thing and such a cool thing about this is that as you do this work, your life gets so freed up from distraction because all of a sudden you realize what is noise. You realize what is just the busy stuff pulling you away from what you really, truly want. And like I said, it frees up so much time. It frees up so much space. It's so good. And I want that for you. I want you to have the time and the freedom, AKA time freedom, to do the stuff that you really want to do. And this work will help you free up all the non-essentials. Just free up all that stuff and let all that non-essential just fall away so that you can really focus on what's important to you in this phase of your life. I hope that this serves you. Thank you so much for being here today. It is my honor and my pleasure to be your guide. And again, I would love to support you in doing these exercises inside of the 1 Degree Shift Tribe. If you'd like to read more about my work, click the link in the show notes to check out the 1 Degree Shift book, which you can find on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you're enjoying this content, which I hope you are, and you're applying this knowledge in your life and are seeing results, I would love to hear about your successes. Click the link in today's show notes, share your success story with me so you can help to inspire others. Also, if you've been loving these episodes, it would mean the world to me if you would rate this podcast on iTunes. A 5-star rating is what I always aim for. Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. All links mentioned are in today's show notes.